Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 794, May the 27th, 2019, Monday, Memorial Day. Yes, it's a holiday. Hopefully we're all off today. I rarely get a day off, but today is one of them, so I'm enjoying the day off. Hopefully you all are doing the same, and hopefully you're all having a good time today. Not going to be a whole lot of new news, over a holiday weekend like this. So unless sometimes you have dumps and things like that, but that would have happened yesterday or the day before if it were going to happen. Here we are on Saturday evening, or Sunday evening, I guess we would say. Is it Saturday? Yeah. Yes, Sunday evening. And there hasn't really been anything dropped in the last 2 days, so I expect it's going to be a quiet weekend. So as I mentioned today, I just want to try to do something a little bit different because we're at this point in this Spygate saga where the worm has turned, and now the investigation, Trump and his folks and the good guys are now going on offense and putting the other team on defense. So finally, this is an important thing that needed to happen. It's taken us way too long, I think, to get here, but now that we're here, I think we're moving in the right direction, and I do think that we have the right person, AG Barr, running this investigation. So I just wanted to give my thoughts on what I think about the investigation and where I think it might go from here. But I also want to spend most of the video just talking about the way that I might approach this investigation. And I'm not saying I'm, anything can hold a candle to AG Barr and probably Mr. Durham. We know their backgrounds, and these are obviously some pretty sophisticated, very clever, very smart individuals. And the type of people you would want, if they're good guys, if they're white hats, you definitely want them on your team, and I think that that is the case here. I would say I'm about 90% sure that Barr and Durham are the right guys for the job that is before them right now. So I'm not comparing myself to them by any stretch, just giving my thoughts on what I would, the way I would view this investigation and the way that I would proceed in this investigation if it were in my hands. So there's really three primary things that I would focus on at the very beginning in starting this investigation. The first thing, these three things, of the three, the first thing I would say is something we've all heard many times, and we've heard it many times because it has proven to be true so many times in an investigation, and that is, number one, follow the money. Follow the money. That is the first principle that I would be following in this investigation. The second principle here would be to get the investigation out of D.C., out of Main Justice. I believe that the entire Washington, D.C. Bureau of the FBI, the DOJ, is completely corrupted. Completely. You must not rely on the people in the Main Justice or Main FBI in Washington to be the people you're relying on to carry out or conduct this investigation. And of course we can see that William Barr has already done this by appointing Mr. Durham, who is a U.S. attorney out of Connecticut. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly why AG Barr did this the way he did it. He definitely wanted to make sure that this was not handled or investigated within Main Justice or Main FBI in D.C., because I think he too understands that it has been totally corrupted. And another thing I like about what Barr did is he didn't make Mr. Durham a special counsel or special prosecutor or anything like that, because that would have given him way too much control over the investigation and would allow him to keep distance between him and Barr to some degree and sort of run his own investigation, at which point Barr cannot control it. I think William Barr knows that is treacherous as the deep state is, that you just cannot take that risk, and that Barr wants to make sure that he is the one running this investigation and that Mr. Durham is working for him. And I think that was a brilliant move by Barr. One of several brilliant moves I've seen by Barr since he's been the Attorney General. So the third principle that I would say is really important here is to maintain a sharp focus on this specific thing that we are investigating, which is the attempted coup of the President Trump and his administration. And the reason I say this is a massive conspiracy that, as we can see, as we've gotten to this stage of the game, that there are many, many other things that were going on as well, including this Operation Hammer, which now it appears was actually the thing that they were trying to protect. And it appears that this Operation Hammer had been underway for at least since 2012, possibly longer than that, and that they were afraid that this would be exposed. This was a major crime. Obama, using this special program set up by Brennan to basically target anyone and everyone, especially their political enemies. And once Trump became obvious that he was going to be the nominee, they turned the program onto him. And so if the truth is discovered, of course, and they dig into it, they'll find that it was this Operation Hammer behind it all. So it was actually, this was the big crime, and taking out Trump, creating the dossier, doing all the frame-ups on all his Trump team members, this was all done to protect a much larger crime and a much larger operation, which was this Operation Hammer. So these two overlap, and so you're probably going to have to expose Operation Hammer to expose the Trump coup. These two things are probably interlaced, and you can't really pull them apart because one led to the other. One is the reason for the other. But it's important not to get distracted on all these other things on the peripheral, such as Uranium One, the Clinton Foundation, Pay for Play, and all these other things. Yes, these need to be investigated. The Hillary email investigation, I know it's very closely connected to this whole thing, but it's a separate issue, and the thing that I would be focused on here is stay focused on the Trump coup. If you're Barr and Durham, focus on the Trump coup and all the things associated with it. There are other U.S. attorneys, other prosecutors who can be looking into the Clinton email investigation, Uranium One, Pay for Play, Clinton Foundation. All these other things can be dealt with individually. Yes, they do have some connection to the overall investigation, but this is such a massive conspiracy that you've got to really sharpen your focus on the primary objective, and that is to discover what happened, who was involved, who did what, who knew what, and is a part of the Spygate story that we're covering here. So that's the three principles that I would be focusing on: following the money, getting the investigation out of D.C., and sharpening, narrowing the focus of the investigation so you do not get distracted and so it doesn't get carried out for years and years and years. We need a quick resolution to this because we have another election coming up in the near future. So now, once I began my investigation with these three principles in mind, the very first thing I would do is, in following principle number one, follow the money, I would immediately begin tracking down all the money. Who paid it? Who they pay it to? What was the money used for? Who did the payments go to? And when? And why? So the obvious first target here would be the Rotten Reverend Clinton. Rotten Reverend Clinton. So the very first thing I would do is I would subpoena from the Rotten Reverend Clinton her personal as well as any organizations that she runs, as well, and that would include the Clinton Foundation, Clinton Global Initiative, to get all financial documents from the period, say, maybe September 2015 through the current day. All financial documents, because I want to see what payments were being made to who, and see if any of them would have anything to do with any of the players, individual players, foreign governments, agencies of foreign governments, private contractors, anyone like that. I would want to see what payments were made through any of these Clinton organizations, Clinton-related organizations. Now, we know primarily that most of the payments were made through her attorney, and he worked for Perkins Coie. So I would certainly subpoena all the financial records of Perkins Coie that had anything to do with payments made to them or for the work that they did for the Rotten Reverend Clinton and the DNC. Which, remember, they were, the two of those were one. Once Hillary won the primary, according to Donna Brazile, she took over the DNC. All decisions, political and financial, were forwarded to her campaign office in Brooklyn, New York. That's where all the decisions were made. So I would want a full subpoena of documents from Perkins Coie of any payments received from the Right Reverend Clinton or the DNC to that law firm, so that I could see who they paid on behalf of the Right Reverend Clinton to formulate the dossier or any other related matters to the investigation. So a massive subpoena of financial documents to follow the money. Because we've been hearing that maybe Christopher Steele was paid directly by the Right Reverend Clinton through the DNC via Perkins Coie. What if the same thing is true of Downer, Halper, and Misfit? We don't know. That's why you have to subpoena all financial records to see who Perkins Coie made payments to on behalf of the Right Reverend Clinton and the DNC. Basically, they were one entity at that time, so that we can follow the money as it relates to the Right Reverend Clinton. Believe me, you will learn a lot of things, because all the people involved were probably paid in one way or another, and it was done likely through Perkins Coie or some other organization that the Clintons run. So I would follow the money, and the majority of it we know. We've heard the figure somewhere between $11 and $13 million paid to Perkins Coie by Hillary and the DNC to fund, to do whatever. Some of it may be for legitimate services, some of it may be for accounting services. Obviously some of it went to pay for the dossier, to pay Nellie Orr, Confusion GPS, Christopher Steele, and who else we don't know until we get those records. So subpoena all the financial documents from the Right Reverend Clinton's law firm, as well as the organizations that she and her husband belong to or operate. We also know that Obama paid $900,000 to Perkins Coie at the exact same time that all this was going on. In the late summer and fall of 2016, Obama made $900,000 payment to Perkins Coie. So he may have funded part of this. So we certainly need to see the payments made regarding Obama via Perkins Coie. And we might even want to take a look at Michael Sussman, the lawyer who specifically was working for the Right Reverend, who we know had a personal involvement in hand-delivering documents to General Counsel Baker, specifically information about the so-called Trump Tower, communicating with the Alpha Bank, and some of these other things. He was directly the person delivering some of that information. He might have set up other secret payment situations to hide payments outside of Perkins Coie on behalf of the Right Reverend Clinton. So I would also take a look at Mr. Sussman to find out if he, as an attorney, opened any accounts during the period of late September 2015 through the current day. We also have the FBI, who we know made, I think it was 11 payments to Christopher Steele, as well as the fact that they apparently, allegedly, paid his expenses and his for his trip to Rome, Italy, to meet with Mr. Gaeta. We believe he was compensated for those expenses and that the FBI was paying him. We also know that this organization run by Daniel Jones, which is funded by George Soros, we know that money was flowing from Soros to this private organization, which was funding Daniel Jones. And of course, Daniel Jones was also in the mix in feeding information into the pipeline regarding the Trump-Russia collusion allegations. So we certainly need to take a look at how that money was flowing. So that's the very first thing I would do in my investigation, is I would get a full look at all the money flow. Who was paying the money, who was receiving the money, and what for. And the particular dates will be important on when these payments were made. Of course, we know Mr. Halper was being paid by the DOD, but he may have also and of course he was that was his cover, his CIA cover. And the CIA hides their their assets and their agents in various parts of the government to give them cover, and a lot of times they take money from their budget and they have ways of moving that money back to these places. So the office that this OIC office that Halper was being paid by in the DOD was likely being compensated in some way, getting paid back by the CIA, because essentially Halper was actually working for the CIA, not really working for the DOD at all. That was a cover. So we may have to look at that as well. So now, once I have once I received all these documents showing where all the money was flowing, who it was flowing to, who it was coming from, who it was being paid to, what they were doing with the money, the times, the dates, payment locations, various things like that, all the details about the money, then I would begin to move on to the next thing, which is I would call my first witness. And let me say that the first person I would interview would be the rotten Reverend Clinton. And the last person I will be interviewing would be Barack Hussein Obama. So I would first, after getting all this financial information, I would call the rotten Reverend Clinton. I would subpoena her and have a conversation with her and ask her a lot of questions. I'd have a lot of questions for her, and specifically I would just go right down the list. Particularly, I'd want to know if she knows personally any of the individuals, such as Halper, Downer, Misfit, Mr. Greenberg, any of these players that were these agent provocateurs or spies or whatever you want to call them. I would want to know if she had any personal relationship with them, knew them, when she spoke with them, how often she spoke with them, what she spoke with them about, and all these things. Well, we already know that she definitely knew Downer. There's good evidence that she knew Misfit. Whether or not she knew Steele or not, we're not sure. So we really don't know. We need to get the answers to those questions. Who did the rotten Reverend Clinton know personally or have communications with? And there would be many questions for the rotten Reverend Clinton. And then I would work my way through my initial interviews with these individuals. And of course, we know that a lot of this was done within the top tier of the FBI, the DOJ, and the intelligence community. That makes it easier. They really purposely wanted to keep this all within what they described as this small group. So it's the players at the very top of these agencies. So I think I would have a list that would probably be somewhere in the range of around maybe 100 people. But certainly all the major players, the rotten Reverend Clinton, Obama, Lynch, Rice, Powers, Jarrett, Rhodes, Comey, McCabe, Priestap, Strzok, Page, Meyer, Rybicki, Trish Anderson, and then of course you absolutely must interview Mr. Halper, Downer, Misfit, and Steele. In fact, right after I interviewed the rotten Reverend Clinton, the next 4 people that I would interview would be Halper, Downer, Misfit, and Steele. Then I would go through and interview all the rest of these people. This would be my initial interview. This is really just a fact-finding mission, which you'll see a lot of times in investigations. It's the initial interview, the warm-up. What did you know? When did you know it? Who did you know? And all these sorts of questions. You know, the who, what, why, when, where, how sort of questions. You get all these out of the way. This way, you can have this mass amount of data now, along with the paper trail of all the money. You can now get all the money information with you. You now have all the basic witness testimony from all the major top tier key witnesses, and now you can begin to compare their statements to look for the lies, of which you will find very many. So now that you've got this done, the next thing that you do is you impanel that grand jury. And you make sure that you have a U.S. attorney in place, which we already do, Mr. Durham. There may be others. And you begin the grand jury proceedings. This is to find out which of these people are going to actually move forward for criminal trials. So once you've got your grand jury and you've done all your grand jury interviews and of the witnesses and potential conspirators, because some of these people are going to be witnesses, some of these people are going to be the actual conspirators, some of them are going to be both. So you're going to go ahead and get all these people through the grand jury process, and then now you're fully into the legal process. And it is during this time that you will have people coming forward, because now they realize that there is going to be criminal prosecutions. These people know to what extent they were involved and what their liability is, their criminal liability is in this plot. They know that the plot has been blown up, it's going to be unearthed, and the people who were committed the criminal acts are going to now be held accountable. Once it becomes clear in their mind that this is absolutely going to happen, this is when you will see these people coming to cut deals. Coming to cut them deals. I would be very stingy about cutting deals at this point. Only if someone could give me just about everything would I be willing to cut a deal with them. And that would mean it would have to be someone at the tippy top, you might say. And unless they could give me Obama or Hillary, if whoever's coming forward could not deliver the hard evidence that I could use to get to Obama or Hillary, no deal. I'm not interested in a deal to take down Comey. I've got everything I need to take down Comey, along with Brennan and Clapper and all these other people. We don't need anyone to come in and cut a deal. These people left a paper trail a mile long. They incriminated themselves. You don't need anyone. I would be cutting no deals. The only deal I would cut is if someone, and that would take someone, one of those people, it would take a Brennan, a Lynch, a Comey, or someone like that to come in and give me Obama or Hillary's head on a platter. Short of those two, no deals. Everyone else, I don't need a deal. I've already got the goods on them. I don't need it. And once all these people are brought in front of a grand jury and their testimony is out there, along with the paper trail of evidence and the money trail and the initial witness interviews, where you have a lot of people who have lied to you, you have plenty of room to negotiate with these people on your terms if you want to do so. And then once you have done this, you will pretty much have what you need to begin laying the indictments against the perpetrators. You'll pretty much have most of the plot together. But now you still have one set of loose ends out there, and that is, of course, the role of foreign governments that they played and what information they may have within their intelligence services. Now, the reason that I would wait till last to go to these people is because unless they know absolutely 100% for sure, and you know exactly what they did based on your investigation up to this point, unless you can go to them and say, look, we have completed our investigation and we know everything you did. We know everything you did, whether it's Ukraine, Australia, UK, Italians, Estonians, whoever. You go to them and say, look, we know this is all coming out. You're going to be terribly embarrassed. Tough luck. You shouldn't have been involved. But we are needing some information when we go to court. We're going to need some witness testimony. We're going to need you to send some people over for the court hearings. You're going to need to bring the documentation with you. We need to have that documentation. We need your cooperation. And you can cooperate with us, and we'll do our best to limit the liability to just a few rogue people within the organizations, where you can fire those people and you can hold them accountable on your own right in your own countries, and you can try to repair the damage there. Or you can give me the finger, in which case we are going to make life very, very tough on you, and we will embarrass you to no end. And in fact, we'll haul you into the international courts, and we will take a look at anyone who's in the position of authority who's not cooperating as being part of the cover-up and part of the crime. So in other words, you can either be a voluntary witness or you can be one of the conspirators. Totally up to you. And that's exactly how I would treat these foreign governments. After all, look what they were involved in. No quarter. No quarter for anybody. Everyone who participated in this plot needs to pay dearly. So this will be my basic outline for the plot. And again, I think the key things here are to make sure you get this investigation out of D.C., which Barr has done. You make sure that you follow that money. Very first thing, get all that information. Because quite honestly, once you get the money trail, that lays out the outline. Everything will follow the money trail. You look at the timelines, what monies were paid to who and when and why. The only thing you need to know is why. But once you look at it in context, the why will be fairly obvious. And of course, you want to narrow the scope of the investigation. That's the three things I'll focus on principally. And of course, the first witness, the Right Reverend Clinton, she's key to the money trail along with Obama. He would be the last person I would interview. I would make sure I do an initial interview with all these people where many people are going to lie to me. That's going to give me the leverage I need to use against them down the road. This is also going to put a lot of them under pressure. And then as soon as they get their subpoena to the grand jury and people start testifying in front of the grand jury, it's at this point people get real nervous because they don't know what other people have said. They don't know what anyone else has said, and you're not going to be getting leaks out of these grand juries the way that you did out of the Mueller investigation or the FBI or the CIA over these past several years, where they all benefited from all these leaks. You're not going to have that going on. People are not going to know who's turning on them. They're all going to become paranoid. And so this is why you wait. And you do the initial interview, and then you wait for the grand juries. That's when you're going to see people coming to you in droves, trying to throw themselves on the sword, say, hey, I was involved in something I probably shouldn't have been involved in. I didn't know exactly what was going on at the time. I knew it was kind of shady, but I didn't want to jeopardize my job. Didn't want to upset the apple cart. I went along. I got along. I shouldn't have. I realize now what everything was that went on. And so I would like to tell you everything I know and how I got caught up in this thing in exchange for some leniency. And so possibly I would be willing to listen, but I would inform them straight away, well, if you can't give me something I don't already have, and I've got basically everything, unless you can give me something that I don't already have, I'm not interested. Now, if you'd come to me a year and a half ago, when all this was known, and you were sitting back being quiet and hiding, hoping it would all blow over, that would have been helpful. I would have worked with you then. Hell, now I don't need you. Got everything I need. Thank you very much. Can you give me Obama or Hillary? Can you provide the evidence that will give me Obama or Hillary? If you can't do that, sorry, hit the door. No leniency. You're going to face the full brunt of your association in these crimes. No quarter, no mercy. So this is basically how I would do it, and this is how I would proceed with this investigation, and I would be doing it as quickly as possible. As quickly as possible. And another thing, after doing the initial interview and looking at the responses I got in the initial interview, and then as I see these individuals going to the grand jury, once I see what they said to the grand jury, I'll be looking at their testimony, comparing it with their original interview, and if I see problems, things that don't add up, things that show that they clearly have changed their testimony or suggest that they are lying or withheld information from me, those individuals are going to get the Roger Stone 5 a.m. SWAT raid, the pre-dawn SWAT raid. And I'm going to SWAT raid them and take every device, every paper document, everything they got out of there. The 5 a.m. SWAT raid for anybody whose testimony to the grand jury is different than the original testimony they gave me in the original witness interview. Any discrepancies, those people will go on my suspicious list and they will get SWAT raided. The pre-dawn SWAT raid. Exactly what they'll get. And then I would put the hammer to them. No leniency. This was a coup. I think if you can show the larger conspiracy, I think, of course, that would be treason, and that's punishable by death. I doubt that's going to happen, and I probably wouldn't go that extreme. But I would certainly make sure that some of these people spend the rest of their life in jail, especially if they turn out to be the central players in the coup plot. And I believe we're going to find that the Right Reverend Clinton, Barack Hussein Obama, John Brennan, Comey, probably Clapper, I would think Lynch and Yates, Strzok, I would think McCabe, I would think there's about a dozen people who might be candidates for spending the rest of their life in Prison Orange. Now, that's how I would kind of do things. Now, what I think is probably going to happen here is I think all the things that are being done for a purpose. I think Barr has already thought this thing completely through. We know that he's got a investigator up there in Connecticut who's proven in the past that he's not afraid to go after and take down deep state targets, FBI, CIA. He's done it before. We can assume he wouldn't like this kind of thing. He seems to be pretty much of a constitutionalist. I think Barr wouldn't have appointed him unless he had confidence in him. And of course, Barr is running him. So that's the important thing. I think Barr is going to get to the bottom of it. And I don't expect he's going to do a witch hunt, but I expect he's going to find the problems, and I think he is going to try to hold people accountable. So I think that is why he requested Trump to do the declassification and give him authority over the declassification. That's really important. I think part of that was to coincide with the IG report released by Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz. We expect that Huckleberry Horowitz report will be out sometime in the next 3 weeks or so. I'm hearing about the middle toward maybe the end of June at the latest. So I think all this is a plan to already have the declassification in place. Barr has probably already got most of the IG's report, and he's going through it now. He's getting other additional information because he's probably looking at it and seeing certain places in there where Horowitz either did not have access to a witness or documents that could help him understand something he was looking at. I think that's where Barr is going to use this declassification to fill in the gaps where Horowitz was not able to go. I think that that's the whole purpose of this. And then Barr is going to use the Horowitz report to give him political cover, because everybody said Horowitz, appointed by Obama, he's a straight shooter. You know, he's not some team player. He's going to call him as he sees him. So I think that they're going to use Horowitz for political cover. The Horowitz report, combined with the declassification and the other things that Barr needs to help fill in the gaps, is going to be used as the justification to begin the process of holding the criminals accountable. And I do not think that they're going to be dragging their feet. I am sure that Mr. Durham already has a grand jury impaneled. They're probably, or at least they're probably at least going through the selection process for jurors right now. They're probably already beyond that, but that would be my guess. And I would think that as soon as Barr gives Durham the go-ahead, they'll start bringing these people in. Again, I would prefer myself having an initial interview myself through the DOJ, and then once I had initial interviews, then I would go to a grand jury. But they usually don't do that at the federal level. That's something you generally see done like locally or in the state or the county or something like that. Just, you know, the way things work. So anyway, I think that that's what's going to happen, and I believe that by the end of the summer, I think by late fall, maybe September, October, Barr is pretty well going to have his report ready to go, and we're going to have the bulk of what happened. I think that the fallout from this, though, will go on for probably 2 to 3 years. I think there'll still be people being indicted 2 to 3 years later after the initial indictments begin. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it. You guys have a good Memorial Day. Don't forget, Dumbass of the Week. A lot of people put their comments in yesterday's video. They have been counted. Your vote has been counted. But if you did not put in for Dumbass of the Week in yesterday's video, put it in the comment sections on this video, and I will get your vote. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you guys. Bye.